John, have I told you I'm addicted to Carwell's auctions?
You might have mentioned it, yeah.
Well, they're online 6 days a week. They're getting 20,000 fresh vehicles in every month. It's actually one of my best sources of quality stock. Listings have got plenty of photos, service history, and background checks for peace of mind. And you can pay sellers in a click with Carwell Wallet. They even transport your car with built-in protection of up to £25,000.
Well, that's more than you will ever need.
Exactly, John. So dealers, if you're not on CarWow, you really should get in on the auction. See what I've done, John?
Oh, God.
Anyway, to find out more, sign up for free at carwow.co.uk/partners/auctions.
Welcome back to the Car Dealer Podcast, where we pick our favourite stories of the week and ask an industry guest to choose which ones were the best. I'm John Ray, and joining me, as usual this week, it's James Baggett. James, it's an exciting week for you, isn't it?
Okay, tell me why.
Because your cars have arrived in Southampton.
Oh, yes, they have. Yeah, very exciting. Two arrived that we knew of. These are the Japanese import cars for anybody new listening to the show. The Japanese import cars have arrived. Two of them arrived that we knew about. The other four sort of got lost somewhere at sea and then suddenly arrived without us knowing, which caused major problems with customs and everybody else who wants a piece of the action because we hadn't submitted any of the documents for those four cars arriving. So we had a customs agent who kind of was a bit angry with us on the phone, and we sort of dealt with it quite quickly. But now we've had to pay like loads of little things, loads of little payments. Like you have to pay a man at the port like £10.24 per car for looking after them for a couple of days.
Well, like a shepherd.
I sort of assume he just stands by them, looking at them. But yes, hopefully, John, we'll be picking them up next week. You're coming down, aren't you, on Wednesday? And we'll be driving to Southampton Docks to pick up a couple of Suzuki Jimneys, which I'm very excited about.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so no, it's been an exciting week for a number of reasons. I've also been out and about. I've been at the Motorway Conference this week. They held their first dealer conference for their biggest buyers and me. I felt a little bit of a fraud being there. I was interviewing Tom Leafs, who's the CEO. He's on the podcast in a couple of weeks, actually. But asked him lots of questions about Motorway's growth. Did you know, John, today they're going to be selling their 1 millionth car?
As in today, in the day?
Today, as in Friday, yeah.
Ooh, it could be you, James. It could be a Kia Venga.
No, I did look at a what was it this morning? No, it was a Sportage, so you were close, but decided not to bid. Patchy service history. Anyway, that's really boring. But it was a very good conference. They had some really good guests and some very interesting panels. One of which was about AI, and they had Kim Costello there from Pinewood AI, which was born out of Pendragon, still listed on the stock market. She was very vocal, I will say, about the role that AI will play in car dealerships in the future, and how she believes that it's going to start taking jobs very quickly. She sort of was telling this story and then spotted me in the front row and sort of addressed me directly and said, James, before you write a story about this, I'm just going to caveat it a little bit. Yes, it's going to take people's jobs, she said, but it's also going to change the way people do business. So she was obviously a bit fearful that I was going to write about it. And obviously I have written about it in my Substack this week. But yeah, AI part of the conference was really interesting. They had Gunther Steiner there. Do you know who he is, John?
We've not crossed paths, no.
I didn't think you would. He is the former Haas Formula One boss who was became very famous for Drive to Survive. I'm sure you're a big fan of that Netflix documentary, John.
It's number 2 behind Gilmore Girls on my shortlist.
Of course. But yeah, he was there, and he's got a very interesting style, let's put it that way. But he was incredibly entertaining. And they had, later on in the evening, that's Hugh Dennis, the comedian. I'm going to use that in inverted commas because it was a little bit like your dad giving a speech at a wedding for your cousin. It was just really, really awkward.
Well, that is his style.
Yeah, is it? I mean, it's not very good. It's not very good. It did not go down well. There was a couple of laughs, but I think they were sort of like out of pity for him, really. But you've had an interesting week, John, haven't you? You've been on your holidays.
I have been on my holidays. I've been to Berlin, the natural destination for anyone going on holiday. Not Saint-Tropez, not Malaga, Berlin.
Berlin. Do you know what I loved about this, John? There was a couple of, I mean, we didn't get many updates about your holiday, but one of them was like, one of them was particularly interesting. It was about the fact that you saw somebody else with the same bag as you, wasn't it? I mean, was that the most
Suitcase,
exciting
James. It's
thing
a
that happened?
suitcase. I mean, this is not going to be funny to anyone watching.
I don't care. I wanted to mention it nonetheless. And the other thing, John, is you sort of the other thing I noticed is you broke your sort of Instagram ban and actually did a post which was so off brand for John Ray. I thought someone had hacked you. You were posting about MILFs.
So, to like just give a bit of context there, James, in Berlin, very liberal and modern city as it is, there's lots of car share companies. You know, you don't own a car, you have a key card thing, and you can go and hire a car from the street. Well, there's lots of companies in Berlin, like Zipcar type stuff, that does that. One of them is called Miles, and they have all of their cars branded with this Miles kind of like script, like Comic Sans vinyl, all over the cars. And what has become apparent is that people have realised that if they chop a bit off the E of Miles, it says MILFs. So everyone in Berlin seems to have been removing these bits from the cars, including enormous vans. So you just walk around Berlin seeing MILFs written everywhere on the side of Mercedes Sprinters parked by the road, which is a little bit confusing. I won't lie. Very strange. Very strange.
Oh dear, John. Yeah, very strange. Oh, that famous German sense of humour.
That was my juvenile Instagram reboot. I like to leave it for nice photos, but I don't take any. That's the problem. And now Twitter's broken. I don't have anywhere to, I don't know, throw this nonsense out into the world.
It was very good. And John, let me give you a very quick update on car buying, or car selling, or not car selling as it may be. It's been a very, very strange week. I had quite possibly the rudest customer I've ever dealt with this week.
Well, I hope they're listening.
So do I. So do I. Yeah. He turned up to look at a Volkswagen Polo. And he basically treated me like I was something he'd just stepped in on the pavement. And he looked at this Volkswagen Polo like he was a forensic scientist. And he got into the seat, and was just going bang, bang, going forwards and backwards constantly. I'm thinking, what are you trying to do? You're either trying to break it, or you've had a Volkswagen Polo that didn't have a very good seat mechanism in the past. I must have had to spend about an hour and a half with this guy, including a very awkward test drive. And at the end of it, he just went, "Thanks very much, bye," and just walked off. And honestly, I was never so pleased to see the back of somebody as that man leaving the Base Point Gosport car park, John. Yeah, not a very nice experience. So hopefully he won't be back. But anyway, let's talk to our guest, shall we?
Anyway, yes, let's introduce our guest. So joining us this week is Oliver Phillpott, founder of EV battery experts Generational. Oliver, welcome. I'm sorry you had to sit and listen to all that.
No, well, I'm glad you managed to transition off of MILF fan photography before introducing me. So thank you for that.
Anytime.
Nice to see you, Oliver. Thank you for coming on the podcast. I'm obviously aware of your business, and we should give a little bit of a summary of it because I've used it recently. The product that you've got for a Nissan Leaf sale, and we found it very useful because the customer who bought it was very new to EVs, and being able to present him with what you do was very good. But I'll let you explain it because it'll be far better than me.
Sure. And then we can talk about your Nissan Leaf. So Generational is essentially an EV battery health check solution for dealers in the UK. I think with used EVs, there's a lot of uncertainty amongst consumers about whether the car's got a good battery or not. And essentially, we're a super simple battery health check. So it's a bit like having all the OEM diagnostics kind of like rolled into an app on your phone and a little OBD dongle that you plug into the car. So it helps dealers conduct a super simple and easy to do battery health check on cars and use that to market the vehicle. I think helps give people that reassurance that they're buying a car with a good battery. So yeah, no, we're a UK startup. We're going pretty quickly. Busy times, but yeah, glad you had your a good experience with the Nissan Leaf. I have to say it was from the data we've seen. I don't want to. I think it was a 2015 model, right? It was a. I don't think I'm speaking too much out of turn by saying that was probably battery-wise a brave choice on the for your first EV. But no, glad you had a good experience with the product, and it hopefully helped to sell the car.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly did. So, I mean, just explaining how I used it. I mean, you get given this. It's a dongle, basically, isn't it? That you plug into the OBD port of the car, which connects to your phone, and you fire up the app. You can test the battery health. But what I thought was amazing is, like, as soon as that had been done, we were emailed a certificate almost instantly. I was on the other computer while Joe was messing about with it in the showroom, and like, the certificate fired up on the computer pretty much before got out of the car. We found it really useful, showing the customer the health of the battery, and I think if we do it again when we do buy some more electric cars, which we will do at some stage in the future, we're going to start putting them on the adverts. So how important is it for customers? This came up a lot at the Motorway conference. There was a big panel about electric cars and talking about battery health and being able to tell customers about it. How much do you think customers want to know about battery health?
That's a good question. So I think you can almost put a number on it now. So Cox Automotive released a study the other day, and I think the question was what information would be most important when you're searching for a used EV online, and detailed description and high quality images is number one, and that's about 77% of people want that. And number two is key EV specific data like the battery health, and that comes in at about 68% of people. So yeah, and then they've got other questions. I think 70% of people want more information on battery health and warranties, right? Because I think my sense is from joining all the Facebook forums from owners and things like that, and you read what people write about their cars online, and I think when it comes to buying a used EV, some people have a concern that, like, they're buying this battery, this big expensive thing that might then go wrong and leave them with a big bill down the line, and you've got a car that doesn't work on top of that, right? So because the battery might be 40% of the cost of the car when it's new, a big expensive bit of kit. So I think just offering that reassurance helps give people, particularly now we're moving to that kind of like early majority of people buying EVs, not the kind of all the people doing tons and tons of research out online, or like the kind of that you might have been getting buyer profiles a few years ago. I think it helps give those people the information they need and a bit of reassurance that they're buying a good car.
Have you seen any of the cars that you've tested having bad battery life? I mean, is there any out there where it's spotted something where there has been a problem?
Yeah, and I think that's where some of our dealer groups increasingly want to build this into a part exchange process. So make sure, because obviously it's a great source of stock, but like if, I would say it's small single digit percentages, right? Like you're talking lower than 2 or 3%, right? Of cars have battery health lower than 70%. But it does happen. They are anomalies, but when it does, we had a customer who tests all their batteries recently. This was probably about 8 weeks ago. Took on 100,000 mile vehicle. I won't say what OEM it was from. So it was out of warranty. That battery had a battery health of, I think it was in the mid 40%, and that car would only do 35 miles on a full charge.
Wow.
That's an anomaly. Right, but that car is now quite hard to sell, right? And if your business depends on turning stock quickly, and it just slipped through the net. They just didn't test it at the time. It real life happens, right? And increasingly with auctions starting to test batteries and stuff, it's harder to then push that vehicle into other channels. and just to try and dispose of it. So yeah, you do see it. It's the vast majority of results are like much better than people expect. I think people are sort of comparing car batteries to their iPhone a lot of the time. That's got, the battery like after 3 or 4 years is really not great, right? But for a car, the average degradation we see is like about 2% a year, but really it depends on how the car has been used. So the absolute vast majority of results, you're creating confidence and reassurance. But if you can use it to kind of protect yourself against those little anomalies, then I think it's a wise thing to do.
And it's not just about mileage, is it? I mean, higher mileage on an electric vehicle doesn't necessarily mean that the battery is going to be worse. Sometimes, I think one of the guys on the panel sessions at the Motorway Conference was saying he took in a very high mileage Nissan Leaf, and because it had been charged properly, it was actually still in a very good state of health. So it's about education, isn't it, for dealers and consumers, because you need something to be able to show them that it is actually quite good, that it has still got some life in it.
We've actually got a customer who has found a really good niche in that. He buys, it's a relatively small business, but he buys high mileage EVs that are relatively young, and generally speaking, and then sells them with a battery health report. And obviously, like you can see, there's no moving parts in an EV really, right? So actually the mileage, as long as it's got, maybe it's got fresh tires and stuff, doesn't matter too much if the battery's good. So I think that's quite a nice niche at the moment, actually. And I think it's working quite well for his business.
What do you drive, Oliver? I
have an Audi Q4 e-tron that's got about 94.4% state of health. So it's a 71 plate. So I've tried to look after it pretty well, but it's it's got a child seat in it. It needs to be big enough for all that sort of paraphernalia.
And for those people listening that don't sort of understand that kind of how you manage your battery life, can you give some tips on how you should do it? The charging. Should you take it up to 100% every time when you're charging it, etc.?
Yeah. So ideally not up to 100%. If you can cap your charge at 80 for the majority of your use case, I think that's probably the most important thing, right? I would say, because there's a significant minority of people who charge it to 100% every night and only do short journeys, and actually that's not great, right? Because it gives them a feeling of reassurance, I guess. And then other things are, rapid charging does have an impact cumulatively over time. So if you're rapid charging all the time, and then you start to get into the slightly more technical things, like we talk about depth of discharge. So that's like charging all the way up to 100 and all the way down to 0 is like giving the battery a bit of a hard life. And then how heavy your foot is, if you like your acceleration and you're putting a lot of power through the battery, whereas softer, gentler driving, I drive like a bit of a granny, then you tend to see less degradation there. So there's lots of factors cumulatively. Mileage in itself isn't the thing that's doing it, right? It's really how the car has been used.
And what's your take on the current state of the market for EVs? I mean, do you think the industry is good enough at selling them in the used and new marketplace?
I think there's a lot of information about how EVs work and stuff like that. That's really only just being built into retail processes by a lot of dealers. So I think it's very, very it's a bit patchwork right now. Like I think there are groups out there where you can get a really fantastic experience and they'll hold your hand through the process, and particularly, as I was saying, in terms of the different buyer profiles that you get, dealers get come in now, because there also is so much information out there online. I think having to cater for the super well researched person who's got questions about battery cells and longevity, and also those who are perhaps like, I don't know, an older couple who are just thinking about, should we take our first step into the world of EV, having to cater for all of that is super hard. But I definitely think there's a number of, there's simple wins in terms of how vehicles are marketed and listed, and the basic information I guess, that would help. A lot of vehicles you're still, even on the website, so you see engine capacity for electric cars or things like that, right? Which just doesn't exist and is valuable screen real estate that isn't being made most of. So yeah, there's a long way to go, but I think getting the basics right first with things like information on the warranties, the battery health, does really go a long way.
And where did this product come from? Where did the idea come from?
Yeah, so a few years ago, I joined a startup and I found myself managing an electric fleet, really not having a clue what I was doing. And it was a delivery business, so it was a really operational fleet, and we were running pretty early generation EVs, and we had quite a lot of battery issues. And when you're delivering stuff and it's your business, that can have a real impact. And then it wasn't long after that I met my co-founder, and he had this amazing experience from his PhD, and he'd spent time at the Red Bull Racing F1 team. There's a lot of batteries used in F1. And, we just sort of said to ourselves, there has to be a way to do a super simple battery health check that really integrates into the processes that retailers have, and make it universal. And that was the beginning, really. We just sort of having that problem. My previous career was actually in leasing, so I kind of knew how important this was to residual values and the transition. So yeah, and then we launched the business in 2023.
I mean, it sounds like dealers should be checking these EVs that are coming in, and using this solution as a way of selling the car. Talk to us about the costs involved, though. I mean, it's obviously it's a business. I mean, talk to those people listening about how much it's going to cost them.
Yeah, sure. So we essentially charge based on usage, right? Because there are different businesses at different scales, and some who might just be like dipping their toe in and buying their first EV and don't want to pay a monthly subscription. So on our most flexible plans, basically we charge per vehicle, and their starting price for that is £28.50 per vehicle, and that cost comes down with scale. So if you're testing more vehicles, then there are discounts available, and the test kit that we sell you is very cheap. It's like less than £100 for one test kit, but then you have it on hand to use if you need it. Even if a car comes in on part X, or you decide you want to scale up your EV share.
Can I ask a normal diplomatic question when it comes to battery EV health, which is, you guys must have a lot of data on what are the best performing manufacturers when it comes to battery stuff, and the worst. I won't ask you who the worst is, but because I'm guessing you won't want to answer that, but who's doing battery management really well? Like, if you buy an EV and someone's driven it for 60,000 miles, generally what's looking in the best condition? Or is it not even that, black and white?
Yeah, so I think I have to try and be as diplomatic as I can, because we've talked about the idea of publishing rankings and things like that, and the fact is there is a lot of variation, really, even between the same model based on how the vehicles have been used. But I can give you some general, hopefully some general takeaways. I'd say the Korean brands come out quite well. And also great batteries, and the way that they work, as a lot of them has got excess capacity, so they will read at a higher state of health for a longer period of time, and you'll get the same range of those vehicles. Teslas, you tend to see quite a lot of variation, because obviously they've also got access to the supercharger network, but others charge at home, but they have got underlying very, very good battery technology, and then your bigger, more powerful cars, where you're putting more power through the battery, you might tend to see a little bit more degradation on those, right? But as I say, it very much varies, and what we are seeing is degradation is improving over time. So, batteries being built better and better. I got some question marks around a lot of the push towards super, super fast rapid charging. Like 180 miles in 10 minutes and all that sort of stuff, what that will do. But yeah, let's see how that pans out.
Just a couple of questions from me. When it comes to selling electric vehicles, there's a lot of dealers out there who are a little bit nervous of doing it, not because they don't know what they're selling, but it's more the fact that they're a little bit worried about the cost that possibly could be involved in warranty claims. What would you say to those people that are a little bit worried about that?
Yeah, I mean the batteries are warranted separately to the vehicles, and generally the warranties on batteries are pretty good. But I would say that like it's starting to the customers who come to us are now starting to look at EVs as a business case, whereas a couple of years ago I think you could sort of potentially avoid them in your stock profile. Whereas now with the types of businesses who come to us tend to say, look, well, actually there's a significant stock out there in the market. And I think used EVs grew about 58% year on year. Saw the stat come out the other day. And it's growing super fast. So actually, how do we do a great job about retailing them? And I think, the warranty cover is there. And so it's really about dipping your toe in the water, experimenting, because you're right, there's still, I think, a majority of dealerships who are not stocking a single EV.
And in terms of that, I mean, we often hear in these sort of kind of conferences and people giving us advice as dealers that you need to be trying it, you need to be selling cars, you need to be dipping your toe in the water. What piece of advice could you give anybody considering it about what they need to think about when selling an electric car? I mean, do you have to treat the customers differently? Do you have to buy the cars differently? I mean, what tips can you give us?
Yeah, I would say a lot of it is about transparency and information. I think the thing that has come up a lot is like the difference in the types of buyers who are coming in terms of how clued up they are and the level of questions they will ask, right? And so going on that journey to being more clued up and knowing the difference between kilowatts and kilowatt hours, some of the terminology there is a bank of it, right? Like there is a lot of different stuff, and I think a lot of that is about just like digesting a lot of that information, and then selling with transparency, right? And also it's okay to like direct people to good resources if there are good ones out there online. There's now a lot of like good consumer information. Auto Trader collate a lot of it. A lot of other organizations on EVs. So I really do think it's all about information and transparency, because that just helps build the trust.
And do you think as well, it's just we're in a transitional period, and I think from a dealer's point of view, it's all quite scary. But I wonder from a consumer's point of view, if buying an EV, if they can see a certificate that says it's got 78% battery health or whatever, that is much easier to understand for them than looking at service history and when should a belt have been changed and all this sort of stuff. You're used to, number one, it's a number, which is nice and easy. You can see what you're getting for your money as to how much health it's got left. And also people are used to it from going on their iPhone and going, oh, it's only got 75% battery health. It's time for that's why it's not holding its charge. Do you think maybe we are worrying about something that in 5 years' time, everyone will just be used to the situation and, looking for certificates like this when they're buying a car?
I think I completely agree with your point about it being easier to understand than service history, because also service history is like, have you got the full service history or have you not got the full service history? It's not like what's gone wrong on this car, or and how important are those integral components. So I think just having one number for, let's face it, the most important component of the vehicle is a lot more straightforward for people. Absolutely. And I think the question, I think if you're talking about the next 5 years, really, as to how things evolve, is how do the valuation companies start looking at incorporating this into how vehicles are valued? If vehicles had a really well looked after battery, then does that command a premium? We're starting to see it happen informally in the market, and also some of those bad examples I've told you about. But those companies are collating the data at the moment to then help feed into how those models work because they need to really reflect the market pricing rather than like dictate it.
And are auction houses using this and starting to put this information on the listings?
Yeah. So that's so BCA battery test, and others are at different stages of implementing it. So I think like that's the other thing is as a dealer, hopefully more and more you'll be able to get these tests when you buy stock from auction. And then also, but the flip side of that is like if you do take on a car that's got a bad, not great battery, then there are fewer options there in terms of where you might push it if you struggle to retail it.
Well, where can people find out more information if they want to check you out?
Yeah, reach out to me on LinkedIn, Oliver Phillpott, or Generational. Search for us on Google, battery health testing. Any one of those, drop us a message, and we're happy to chat.
Well, thank you for joining us today. Very interesting stuff, but I think we should probably do some stories, John. We'll be right back. Now, John, I'm really enjoying how easy it is to pay sellers on CarWow.
I mean, presume you'd rather not pay them at all.
No, that is true. But now I can do it with CarWow Wallet. You can pay sellers, finance houses, and more instantly, literally in one click. It's secure, easy to use, and gets rid of all the pesky finance back and forth. It's a total game changer, John.
That does sound pretty good.
If you want to find out more, dealers can log on to carwow.co.uk/partners/carwow-wallet. Now, back to the podcast.
James, you won last week, so you can start talking now.
I was afraid you were going to say that because there's lots to choose from this week. It's been a very, very busy week for news. Our website's gone crazy, hasn't it? Had over 500,000 visitors this week due to a few punchy stories. And I'm going to pick one of them because firstly, I was a little bit disappointed about it. That's putting it mildly. I was very disappointed about it. This is a used car dealer who was jailed for illegally selling £300,000 worth of insurance write-offs. This is a Flint car trader called Zana Mohammed who sold insurance write-offs without telling customers. So this was a court case that came up this week off the back of an investigation by Flintshire County Council's Trading Standards team. He'd actually had an official warning from them. So they'd obviously been out to him, said, you shouldn't be doing this, but yet this guy carried on doing it. And he ended up in Mould Crown Court, where he pleaded guilty to this fraudulent trading. What he'd been doing is he'd been selling a significant number of Category N and Category S written off cars between March 2021 and June 23. He'd obtained them from salvage auctions, and then he'd been listing them in the online in a variety of different marketplaces, but not mentioning the fact that they were write-offs, which is obviously incredibly disappointing. The reason I picked this story is I just, like I say, I find it very disappointing that when we're too often writing these stories about car dealers, and I'm going to use that term very loosely because I don't think I can label this guy a car dealer. I mean, he's a criminal, isn't he? But there's quite a few of us out there, many good guys trying to do things really well, and it takes me back to that Volkswagen Polo viewing that I had this week. This guy turned up, and I mean, if he'd started the conversation by punching me in the face, I wouldn't have been surprised. I mean, he clearly hated.
You might have been surprised at the time.
Well, yeah. No, I wouldn't have been. No, he was obnoxious, but I think he was obnoxious because he hated car dealers. I mean, he'd been doing the rounds, obviously seeing cars, and he didn't like the trade. And I just get the feeling that unfortunately you read too many stories like this and it drags the trade down even further. I was thinking about just like creating a little scrapbook of these terrible stories and just putting them on the table in my showroom, just saying, look, you could be buying from people like this, but look, we're actually nice people, so why don't you buy from us instead?
That is the most nonsensical thing I've ever heard.
It might work. I don't know.
Just,
That's what
I
my
know
brain.
you're very comfortable. You're very comfortable sat in that £8,000 kazoo chair in the corner. But can I just have a look through this book of woe and see? Just put some
I mean,
thoughts into your mind that might be bad.
maybe it won't work. Maybe it won't work. But I don't know. When I wrote my my notes this morning at 5 a.m., it felt like it made sense.
Okay,
Yeah,
there we go.
might be the fact that I didn't have much sleep. But anyway, yeah, I picked this story because I'm very disappointed to read it. Far too often are we covering stories like this, and the reason we do is, well, firstly, a lot of people in the trade want to know when people are doing naughty things, and consumers lap the stories up, don't they, John? Because it's had about 300,000 views on our website this week. But yeah, a disappointed story, and that's my first one.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm also going to say I find it disappointing that there are, well, within the third paragraph up comes the keyword Facebook Marketplace, which is just like the Wild West for buying anything. And I think every time we have had any scam, that we're not talking about dodgy dealers in inverted commas. I'm talking about literal dealers that don't exist, people trying to scam people out of money. It ends up on Facebook Marketplace, and people go in there because consumers go in there because it's a simple, easy to find stuff. It's a name people trust and recognize. And Facebook, not that I've given them a right of reply here, but Facebook, get in touch if you're listening. Facebook don't seem to be remotely interested in firming up any security on their platform. Whereas people like Auto Trader and Motors, I mean, it does say eBay here as well, is one of the places he was using to list this stuff. But your usual marketplaces have an automated system for flagging written off cars. Obviously, there's ways around that if they've not declared it. Well, if it wasn't written off in the first place, but it still had accident damage, blah, blah, blah. But there are systems in place to try and keep consumers from buying stuff that's been written off and not declared. And some platforms are not doing it, and they should be.
Very well said, John.
Thank you.
Very well said. I like that. It was proper soapbox stuff.
Yes.
Oliver, just an opinion. Bearing in mind this is a car dealer podcast. Just your opinion. I mean, do you think the general public? What do you think they think of car dealers on the whole?
Yeah, it's come up with us a lot because I think I didn't realize it when we first started the business. Was like one of the reasons why that really cuts through about what we do is that we allow dealers to. Sorry, I'm plugging myself here. I didn't really mean to do this.
It's fine.
It's to plant the flag in the ground for transparency and like giving people a number they trust. And I think like it's stories like this that it's sad in a way, right? Because it perpetuates this sort of the vast majority of people are like great businesses just trying to do right by the customer in an industry that has a lot of tough things going against it at the moment. It's really sad to hear stories like this. So yeah, I definitely think consumers have there's still trust there to build.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Well, that's my first one, John. A slightly strange one to kick off with, but I've done it nonetheless.
Okay, thank you 5 a.m. James for that. I'm going to start with Nissan because Nissan have announced some big news this week. Well, big global news. They're in a little bit of trouble, Nissan, and they are sort of restructuring how their business operates around the world for lots of different reasons. I'm sure Donald Trump's tariffs have also not helped in this regard. But anyway, they're planning major job cuts with 20,000 roles and 7 factories to be cut globally. So to put that in perspective, I don't have the number of workers they have across the whole world. But they have 17 plants at the minute making various things, cars, engines, whatever. That's going to go down to 10. So they're near enough halving the number of factories, which is a big, big chunk. The immediate question is, what does that mean for Sunderland? And I think the answer is probably not that we've had any indication as to what's happening at the minute. I don't think Sunderland will be affected by this because Sunderland is one of the plants that is objectively doing quite well. It supplies Britain and Europe. Britain, I don't know why I said it like that. Britain and Europe with lots of Qashqais and Dukes, and it's soon to be Leaf and various other things as well. It's not struggling, that plant. They're investing lots of money in it. So I think probably things are okay there. But I just thought this is an enormous... I've not seen a restructure like this in a car company for quite some time. It sort of reminds me of when I say reminds me of. I was probably about 6 when this happened, but when don't shake your head, James. When Carlos Ghosn came in to Nissan was in a pretty dire situation in the 90s, and he came in and was le cost killer and chopped factories and like reduced the number of platforms that Nissan were producing and reduced the number of cars that Nissan were producing, and of course eventually tied them into Renault. But it's almost a plan akin to that. There is so much culling of factories going on here. I think some of it is down to, even before we talk about Trump, I think there's issues with China. China is moving away from Western automakers. I think it's fair to say. I think, as you would probably have noticed in the Shanghai Motor Show, James, was there a lot of Western stuff there? Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, was there? Okay, because
Well, not a huge amount, but I mean, you had people like BMW, Mercedes, Bentley had very big stands and were launching stuff. So.
But it's from what I understand, Chinese consumers are moving away from Western stuff because it's more expensive, and actually Chinese car makers are now making stuff that's sort of better, particularly in China. I would imagine a lot of it we don't get. And then America, of course, Nissan have struggled because they haven't got enough hybrids, and that's what America wants at the moment. So they've got quite a recovery to undertake.
Yeah,
What do you make of this, James?
Well, I think you've summarised that perfectly well, and my thoughts were very similar with the UK. I think you sort of have to look at Nissan and the UK in isolation, really. They've got 2 of the best-selling models in the UK with the Qashqai and the Duke. Very, very popular cars. Made here in this country, and I think you sort of have to just sort of hive it off. It's such a massive global business that actually, when you look at the UK, it's very successful here, and they've got some really interesting things coming. I'm going to a Nissan event next week, funnily enough, to see the new Micra on Tuesday. I'll be chatting to the new MD, James Taylor, who's just joined the business from Vauxhall. So that will be interesting. It'll be interesting to see what they've got to say. But yeah, I think it's such a big global company. You need to look at the UK in isolation. Would be my point on this.
Agreed. Oliver, what did you make of this?
Reminds me of something Andy Palmer said at your fantastic car dealer live event around Nissan being such a great innovation powerhouse, but several times, unfortunately, they've struggled to kind of turn those innovations into market dominance. And I think, struggling now, and I wasn't so sure about the name of the plan. I think it's Nissan, the action-based recovery plan. So yeah, I think it'll be a tricky few years coming up, and it's feeling the pain of those, there's innovations that they haven't quite capitalized on.
Agreed. Yeah. Over to James.
Right, over to me. Thank you. I'm going to go with my next story. I think I'm going to go with Vertu because they are the last remaining listed business selling franchise cars on the stock market, aren't they? Which I always find very disappointing. But anyway, nice to see their results come out.
Until you list, obviously, James.
Until I list, yeah, the Clever Car Collection. Get in now early. Subscribe now. Excuse me. Yeah, Vertu Motors results came in this week for 2024 with revenue of 4.8 billion, a modest rise that was of 1.7% on the year before. They said in their results that dealer acquisitions, of which they've done quite a few over the last few years, we do need to remember that, has added 123 million pounds to the pot, and they've managed to dispose or close of some other dealers, which has actually reduced the business by 40.6 million pounds. So a number of changing figures there when it comes to revenue. The important one, though, is obviously adjusted profit before tax. It came in at £29.3 million, which was a 15.8%, nearly 16% fall on the year before. thanks to some underlying, according to the results, operating profitability problems due to the impact of the ZEV mandate. Now, we know Robert Forrester, not a massive fan of the ZEV mandate. I think it's fair.
You're not?
Apparently not, John. Apparently not. He's kept it quite quiet, hasn't he? But yes, apparently not a massive fan. That's caused some problems. There's obviously been some other losses. Those have arisen from acquisitions and new dealership startups. So that's caused some problems, say Vertu. Like for like, new vehicle sales came in at 97,600 cars in a year. I mean, that's an impressive number, isn't it? Nearly 100,000 new cars sold, down 1.7% the year before, but still massive number. And so, impressive figures when it comes to new car sales. Used car sales, meanwhile, they were down just 0.7% at 85,000 cars. I mean, I just think when you look at those sorts of numbers, 97,000 new and 85,000 used, it just shows you how big that business is. So interesting set of results. I don't know whether they will be that pleased with them. 15.8% fall in profit before tax is not great. 29.3 million is still a large chunk of change, though, isn't it? I mean, I think the important thing that comes out of these results, though, is the fact that Robert Forrester says in the last couple of months have been much more normal and are much more profitable. So I think, as we've said many times in this podcast before, 2024 was a difficult year for dealers. We're starting to see a little bit of more normality coming back. Those highs and lows are disappearing. And these look like a slightly more normal set of results from Vertu Motors. So, yeah, interesting, John. It just gives us a real insight, doesn't it, into what's actually happening there. Robert Forrester is always very detailed with his results. Nice to see them when they come out in the stock market, because it has to be warts and all, and they're presented in with all those facts and figures, and you can pore over them, as we have done for this story on the website. What did you think? I mean, do you think they were good or bad? Or
well, I was just going to go back to the ZEV mandate, because Robert Forrester, I think, was quite vocal in about December about the issues they were facing, because the ZEV mandate worked on a 12-month calendar year. This strange sort of situation where they couldn't hand over new petrol and diesel cars until January, because manufacturers were allegedly saying, no, you cannot do that. We have not hit our target. Please hand it over in January, which is a difficult conversation to have with your customers. And I just thought it's interesting that with that, I think 2024, as you've said, is going to be a bit of a standalone year in that regard, because although we bang on about the number of EVs, the percentage of EVs having to go up this year, as we've said before, or I've said before, the mechanisms in place now to mitigate that have improved dramatically. So in real terms, from where I'm sitting, it looks like car manufacturers are going to have to register less EVs, explicitly EVs, this year than even last year. So as long as they still mitigate by reducing their overall CO2 with plug-in hybrids and whatever else. So I can see this year being better than last year in that regard.
What do you think, Oliver?
Yeah, I mean, I read the story. I think, yes, there's the headline numbers, but it also sounds like Vertu have a lot going on in terms of investments and projects. There was, I think they're consolidating the brands under Vertu, right? So I think Bristol Street Motors is going, and it reads to me like there's a lot of investment in new sites, acquiring new groups, and so even if last 12 months is down a bit, it sounds overall like I mean, obviously it's still a great business.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you've highlighted an important point there. You've got to remember, when businesses are busy and they're doing lots of different things, it can take the focus away on somewhat. They did buy a lot of businesses, and it takes a little bit of time to get them integrated into a larger group and firing on all cylinders. So perhaps we've seen a little bit of that. So we will be watching how they get on over the next few months and years. John, over to you.
I'm going to talk about the Renault Twingo.
Are you?
Yeah.
It's
not really the second most important story of the week, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. It's in front of me. So good news for fans of small electric Renaults, because the Twingo will be sold in the UK, which I'm very excited about. And I know you'll say, but you're not going to buy one. But that is correct. I'm probably not. But I'm glad that it's on sale, because if it looks anything like the concept, it will look really good. And this is basically a debate about whether it was going to be made in right-hand drive or not. And Renault UK have lobbied Renault France or whatever to bother making it in right-hand drive because they think it will sell very well. And I think if it's going to start at 17 grand,
hang on, sorry, whoa, stop there. 17 grand for a Renault Twingo?
Yeah.
What? They're like 8 grand cars, aren't they?
James, what year do you think we're in?
I'm 17 grand for a Renault Twingo. Are you kidding me?
How much do you think cars cost now?
Not that much. Like, no, I'm out. I'm not buying a 17 grand Renault Twingo.
You woken up in 2008.
17 grand? Are they mad?
17 grand. How much do you think a Renault 5 is?
Oh God, I hate to think. No, they're quite a lot of money, aren't they? They are, and I get that, but still, 17 grand.
I think you need to remove your brain from the used dealership where you're dealing in Picantos that were registered 15 years ago.
I've got a lovely one for sale at the moment.
Have you? 17 grand would make it one of the cheapest cars in the UK.
Blimey, I am.
That's your Spring. If you're not interested in the Twingo, there, James.
Spring, yes. What's the Spring cost?
Oh, like 15, if that's 16.
It might be less than 15. Actually, I think it begins with a 14.
For what? So one of the cheapest electric cars was that the caveat there? One of the cheapest electric cars on sale, right? Got you.
Caveat.
Okay, yeah.
I don't think there are that many cheap normal cars below 15 grand, but anyway. But if you look at the interior, James will see it's full of technology. It's very interesting. You'll like it when it comes out, I promise.
I mean, it does look quite funky, but I'm not spending 17 grand on that.
Fine, Oliver. Are you excited by the Twingo? Please say yes.
Yeah, I think that I think Renault are nailing their design language, right, and a lot of this stuff. My parents used to take me on family holidays, driving down to the south of France in an old Renault 5, and it's all evocative of that. So small city cars. It's fun. I think they're nailing it.
Mm. And what I love as well is it does look like the original Twingo, which we were forbidden from having here in the UK. So it was always like when you go over to France, we don't see so many now, but you used to see hundreds of them. These kind of little bubble-shaped things. So I'm glad they brought a bit of fun back when they could have just done something completely dull, which is what lots of car makers do. James, you look like you want to move us on.
I'm still shocked at the 17 grand Twingo. Anyway, I am going to move us on to the US trade deal. This is Trump's tariffs. We're back on Trump. And this is SMMT boss Mike Hawes warning that car makers face an existential threat unless I don't know why I said it like that. Unless final details of the new UK-US trade deal are confirmed urgently. So this was at an SMMT event this week with a whole bunch of journalists. So obviously a message they really wanted to get out there. Mike Hawes. Do you want to do the catchphrase, John?
Mike Hawes.
Thank you.
Mike Hawes.
Mike Hawes stressed the urgency, noting firms that already have cars ready to ship, but due to the lack of clarity on pricing or the quota allocation, they're not doing it. He's praised the UK government for prioritising the automotive sector, but said clarity is now needed. The thing with this, John, the reason I picked this story is it surprised me a little bit. I didn't realise that the deal that they did, reducing tariffs on cars from 27.5% to 10%, was only temporary. Did you know that?
Well, when you say temporary,
well, I don't think it's actually been set in stone. This deal that they've done. I mean, it was lauded, wasn't it, last week? In the headlines as this saviour deal that was going to save the car industry. Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, was at Jaguar Land Rover's plant in Solihull, talking it up in that weird love-in between him and Trump. But it sounds like from this story and from what Mike Hawes is saying, that it's not actually fixed. It's not in stone.
Yeah, I think what Mike Hawes is getting at here is that we've had the announcement, which is jolly lovely, great, pat on the back, well done, Keir, etc., etc. But we don't know any of the actual details, and it's not actually in place yet. So I suppose, it's worrying that there's, we've had it announced and further details will come. And now we're sat here going, right, well, is it in place now? Like if we send off our defenders to New York or whatever, are they going to land and then still be hit with 27.5, or are they going to hit the 10? When's it actually coming into force? I guess that's sort of the point.
Hmm.
The other thing I took away from this is the lack of detail in how this is going to be. So we've got 100,000 cars is the limit that America has kindly given us for this trade deal, and we're currently doing 102,000, 107,000, something like that, cars to America. But how do you distribute that? How do you decide who's getting is it just first come first serve? Like you start now, and then in a year's time you go, right, stop any after this date until it renews again, like your data running out or something, are going to be hit with 25%, or do you try and give everyone an equal slice of the pie? Do you say to Jaguar Land Rover, well, you export, let's say, 60,000 cars, so 55,000 of those are going to be tariff free, and you say to Caterham, of your chunk, 95% will be tariff free, and you say to Aston Martin the same, and Bentley the same. How do you work that all out without giving an unfair advantage to larger car makers? I think is the other thing he was just saying.
And I think this is what Mike Hawes is getting at, isn't it? I mean, I'm just looking at the quote here that he said. He said there will be a quota of 100,000 vehicles, but exactly how that's allocated is still to be determined.
Well, and who determines it? Presumably we as a government gets to decide. Or do you get together as it's very difficult because I don't think you can. The SMMT is not someone to decide it. They're just a sort of lobbying body, really, aren't they? I think you get into difficult water when car makers get together and try and decide these things. It's I don't understand how it works, really.
Maybe they could pick straws. I'd like to see that. The boss of JLR, Bentley, just there. Oh no, I've got the short straw. Anyway, Oliver, what did you think? What do you think about this whole deal? I mean, it's caused major problems for the industry, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, this sad moment. The sign of the times is that lack of detail on implementation is kind of the norm now, right? And it's like, let's get the headline out, we'll get some photos and shake hands, and then we'll figure out the rest of it. So yeah, I think it's another case of I think we might be in a very different place in 12 months. It might be that everything, tariffs have already come down a lot. Let's cross our fingers for how things will turn out. But definitely, obviously, we need important people like I won't do your voice, John. Like Mike Hawes, pushing for the detail on this stuff. So we can't stop pushing for what is needed, because also the other thought was we're only sending, isn't it, about 102,000, 103,000?
Yeah, 101,000 like cars last year.
So why didn't it just not cap it?
No, it's a very good point.
I know.
A lot of headache to work this out for what is quite a small part of the deal.
Yeah.
My guess would be Trump probably wanted a number to go back and say they've been capped, so they can't, get ideas above their station. They being us, in case we were suddenly like, yeah, let's make more American-focused cars.
It was interesting, though, wasn't it, how it's kind of paid off and caused problems with the Americans as well. I'm sort of like mixing in a second story here, but we did write about a second story about the big three Detroit car makers claiming that Trump's UK tariff deal is actually hurting the American car industry, because we get to send in 100,000 with the 10% rate, but because a lot of these big American car firms build stuff in other countries, or a majority of the parts of these cars in other countries, they're being hit by this 25% rate as well. So it's not helping. It's not even helping the US based car makers either. So yeah, I don't think enough thought has gone into this, John.
I saw that, and what you mean? Something Trump's come up with was not well thought through. I am shocked, James. It's such an accusation. I think I saw the American car maker story as well, and I thought, I didn't think they were seriously of the opinion that suddenly Jaguar Land Rover was going to replace Ford in America in terms of producing cars. But I think it was just use of a crowbar to try and leverage a bit more. Use a bit more leverage on their imports from Mexico and wherever else they make cars. American car makers actually make cars, not necessarily in America. So there's definitely stuff on home turf to be sorted out that they haven't sorted out, if we're talking about details.
Yeah.
But are they actually viewing British car makers as a threat to American ones? I suspect they're probably not, because I think you'd probably have to, even aside from our 100k target or limit, you would have to blanket this nation in car production facilities to produce enough cars to satisfy American demand to worry GM, Ford, and Stellantis. But there we are.
True. I think we're sort of running out of time, John.
I think we probably are. I'm going to forfeit doing another story because I can't be bothered. So
good work ethic there, John. Love it.
So thanks for listening. So Oliver, before I ask for your verdicts, are there any stories you think we should have talked about this week?
Well, JLR, big success story for them.
That's true. Yes, they're taking over America and replacing Ford, GM, and Stellantis in one fell swoop. No, they're not. No, that was the news that their profits are up, having effectively annexed Jaguar, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I think even with the Jaguar goings on, I think it's a real testament to the fact. I mean, the Range Rover and the Defender have become, an icon and a real for that aspirational, high value segment of the market.
Absolutely, and nice to have a bit of positive JLR news.
True.
So I'm going to have to ask you, what was your favourite story? Who chose the best ones? Who's your winner? That was 3 questions in one.
Well, you're at a disadvantage, John, because you only got 2. But you went for the Renault Twingo. That's my favourite. We've got to go for that one.
Unbelievable.
Twingo.
Right, cut. I'm leaving.
No, we've got to have some positivity. The Twingo coming. I think that's. I think you're my winner.
Oh, thank you. And at the low price of £17,000, a bargain. A bargain. I'm glad you agree with me. Well, all that's left for me to say before James can interrupt is thank you, Oliver, for coming on today and talking about all things battery electric vehicles, which is a subject we do like to talk about here. And thank you to James as well for being here. Thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode, so make sure you're subscribed. So you are subscribed. I can talk, so you can be notified when that goes live. I need some coffee. You can also watch us on YouTube. Why you'd want to do that, I don't know, but please go over there and watch us.
Just for John's quiff, go there for that alone.
I need it cut. Anyway, if you want to check out the stories we mentioned today, take a look at the show notes below or head to cardealermagazine.co.uk. Thanks for listening and goodbye.